Every 50 minutes, Windows is running this thing in the background. It checks your hardware, collects information about your PC, and apparently talks to Microsoft's servers. And yeah, that sounds pretty suspicious. People online are calling it hidden spyware, but Microsoft Scott says it's actually just a diagnostic system. Basically Windows, checking that everything is working properly and trying to catch problems before they turn into crashes. So who's right? Is Windows quietly collecting way more information than it should, or is this just another case of the internet freaking out over something completely harmless? Microsoft says your personal data is safe, but honestly, I'm not taking their word for it. We're going to look at what this service actually does, what it collects, where that data goes, and most importantly, what's actually happening under the hood. Open Task Manager right now, and there's a good chance you'll see a process called WHVC. That stands for Windows Health and Optimized Experiences Service. And this is where things start getting interesting. It hasn't always been this obvious, which is why people started paying attention when it began showing up as an active background process on newer Windows builds. So I started digging into what it actually does, and underneath the service, there's a Lua script called ecp.v2.lua. If you look at the environment variables controlling it, you'll find two that immediately stand out. Now, seeing a Lua script inside a Windows service might sound pretty sketchy. Microsoft runs the script inside a Lua sandbox. Basically, the script is isolated from the rest of your system, so it can run its health checks without having unrestricted access to your files or just grabbing whatever data it wants. Microsoft says the whole thing is there to optimize how Windows manages your hardware. Things like temperature, battery health, CPU usage, and even screen brightness can be monitored locally to help Windows make decisions about power and performance. And honestly, that part doesn't sound too crazy, but here's where I think the real question starts. Checking your hardware locally is one thing. What I'm really interested in is what happens when that information leaves your PC. What actually gets sent over the network to Microsoft servers? Because that's the part we can't just take Microsoft's word for. So let's find out. To run a real test, we first need the process-wide D or PID hosting WHESVC. We locate the service inside Task Manager, trace it to its svchost.exe parent container, and then open command prompt as administrator to run. That confirms our PID is 5856. Now, if you go into Wireshark expecting to filter by process ID using proc.pid, you're going to run into a wall. It doesn't exist. There is no native process filtering field in standard Wireshark capture setups on Windows. In fact, it's a long-standing unresolved feature request on their GitLab. Static analysis tells you what the code can do. It doesn't tell you what it actually does. So the next step is watching it live. We started simple. No process filtering yet, just a clean, honest capture of everything leaving this machine. Filter set to tls.handshake.type equals 1, so we catch every TLS handshake attempt on the network, and we just let it run. Full 15 minutes, matching the exact interval everyone's been arguing about, so there's no excuse for missing a cycle if it's real. 15 minutes later, here's what we've got. Dozens of handshakes, Bing, Google, our own site traffic, some background apps, and a long list of Microsoft telemetry infrastructure. Domains like events.data.microsoft.com and footprint.dns.com. That's real. That's basic Windows telemetry, and none of it is new or secret. This is the normal background hum of any Windows 11 machine. But here's the problem. Not one packet in this list can be tied specifically to whesvc. Wireshark doesn't know which process sent what. It just sees the network interface. So at 50 minutes, staring at a wall of generic Microsoft traffic, we're stuck. We haven't found the mystery service. We found noise. To fix that, we have to isolate the actual process ID running under the hood. So here's how you do it properly. You run Sysinternals process monitor in parallel. Filtered strictly to PID 9400, it changed when I rebooted the PC, so put the PID under the network category. while Wireshark captures all raw adapter traffic in the background. Then you cross-reference the exact timestamps afterward. Except when I first set this up, I made a classic mistake. Take a look at Procmon. I accidentally set the filter to process name is procmon.exe instead of svc host.exe. A simple one-word oversight that completely, silently excluded every single network event from our target service. I'm leaving that mistake on camera for a reason. Tech forums are loaded with people claiming they ran quick logs or filtered by process ID without realizing their tools weren't recording what they thought. If your tools aren't configured right, you aren't verifying anything, you're just generating noise. Once the Procmon filter was corrected to PID 9400 and set strictly to network activity, we spun up both tools simultaneously for our second capture run. On screen, you can see the raw figures from that run. Wireshark recorded 78,117 frames totaling 105 megabytes of raw data. Next to it, Process Monitor scanned over 4.1 million total system events, filtering strictly for network activity tied to our target PID. And here's the honest result: 0 matching network events from the WHVC PID during the entire observed window. I'll look at the Wireshark pane from that exact same time frame. It's packed with dozens of outgoing TLS handshakes, hitting Bing, Google, Anthropic's Claude, Movavi, and the usual array of Microsoft endpoints like events.data.microsoft.com and footprint DNS.com. But as we proved, not a single one of those packets can be verifiably linked to WHESVC because Wireshark on its own lacks process level attribution. This is the actual gotcha of the entire controversy. Most of the raw traffic people are holding up in online threads as proof of WHVC telemetry isn't verifiably coming from WHVC at all. Let's look at Microsoft's actual claim. Scott Hanselman says performance traces are logged locally to %system root /temp /diag output dir /wsvc and only leave your machine if you manually file a feedback hub report. That's a testable claim. To prove it, we trigger a feedback hub report while monitoring Resource Monitor, Procmon, and Wireshark. We see if WHESVC traffic fires only when prompted by the user. That's the stress test for part 2. Is Windows profiling your hardware every 15 minutes? The timer is real. It traces back to environment variables in the code. But on a live, isolated process, we caught 0 automatic uploads. What we did catch was our own tooling mistake, which is the whole point. Verify headlines yourself and admit when the testing comes up incomplete. Microsoft's explanation holds up better than the panic post implied, but until we capture that feedback hub trigger live, the case isn't fully closed. Subscribe for part 2, where we pull the trigger live. Drop your capture logs in the comments.